tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So blessings to you all. In a few days we'll be celebrating the full moon day we know as Magha Puja. This is a Buddhist festival day or celebration that's maybe not the most well-known of Buddhist festivals. Perhaps Wesak is more popular, or the entering of the rains, or the Katina Day. These are Buddhist festivals that most people have heard of. Magha Puja is less well known. It's the day that we remember the occasion when the Buddha came together with 1,250 fully enlightened monks, and they say it was a meeting that took place without any prior arrangement. So that's a pretty amazing thing. They all knew to come to where the Buddha was staying, the Weluwana Arama, one of the first monasteries in Buddhism, and to commemorate the occasion the Buddha gave a teaching we know as the Ovada Patimokkha. So 1,250 enlightened monks is already an amazing thing. The fact that they came together without any prior appointment is amazing. And then the Buddha giving this teaching, Ovada Patimokkha, which we still have today, it's also an amazing thing. And it kind of set the tone for the Buddhist monastic form, which has been handed down to us until today. It's something Ajahn Chah, our teacher, used to point out or emphasize the role and the importance of meetings. Like-minded individuals, on that occasion they were all fully enlightened. But whether we're enlightened or not enlightened, the importance of meeting regularly as a community, monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, this is important for helping all of us to benefit from the teachings. This last year, many people have experienced the difficulties of lockdown, and particularly isolation, where maybe you've been trapped at home, especially if you live on your own. It can be quite challenging for long periods of time being totally alone. Even though we have technology to help keep us in touch, like today, we're using Zoom. It can be quite challenging not meeting in the flesh with other people very often. And the Buddha realized this, and he saw that the strength of the Sangha would come through regular meetings coming together. And the fact that this first group of monks who came on that day, the Magha Puja, the full moon in February, were all enlightened, only highlights that point. Because you might say, oh, they were all enlightened, they don't need to meet, they don't need to be taught anything, they're all fully enlightened already. They've practiced the Eightfold Path, what the Buddha taught, realized the fruits, they're all arahants, or we say kinasawa, they're beyond the defilements, they've abandoned all their defilements. They don't need to meet, and yet they still met together. And that's to preserve the Dhamma. And one of the ways we preserve the Dhamma and the Vinaya, the monastic discipline, is by meeting together, showing respect for the Dhamma Vinaya. And the Buddha encouraged that even for an enlightened individual to still respect the Dhamma. And it's a powerful thing when groups of people come together to practice the Dhamma, to listen to a talk, to hear a recitation of the monastic discipline, which is what we do now every 2 weeks. The discipline we practice is called the Patimokkha training rules. We hear a recitation of them every 2 weeks, and this is descended from that first occasion, even though in the early days they hadn't yet codified or made the Patimokkha discipline up yet. But the tradition has continued from that time. We come together to hear the Dhamma, show our respect for the Dhamma, for the Vinaya. And that helps, everyone in the community, because not everyone is enlightened. Many of us are still practicing, and we need sometimes the support of others. We get a boost of energy, we get some wisdom from mixing with fellow practitioners, we get mental strength, we get good example by meeting with fellow practitioners, we get warmth, we get the qualities of metta and karuna from others when we meet with them. So it's good for us and it's good for future generations. In Ajahn Chah's lifetime, he made Magha Puja an occasion where his Sangha of students would come together, have a meeting. And many people have observed one of the reasons Ajahn Chah's Sangha is still very strong and expanding all over the world today is because of this, the realization that meeting together frequently, regularly, in harmony, it helps us all. It's not that solitude, isolation has no role in Buddhism. Of course, people go off onto solitary retreat and spend time on their own as well. But to come back together can give a lot of strength to the community. We can share ideas, hear the Dhamma from each other, support each other in different ways. So from this, the origin story, the original day when the Buddha gave this teaching, the Ovada Patimokkha, and the monks, the enlightened monks, all came together, right down to this day. We've continued this tradition. So it's an important reflection, the importance of Sangha, the community, the ordained community, but also lay practitioners who come together and practice with Sangha, the importance of coming together, meeting in harmony with respect for the Dhamma Vinaya. It's something that always seems to bring benefit, as far as I can see. Of course, on that day, there's also the actual words of the Buddha. We believe that this teaching, the Ovada Patimokkha, was given and provides a very useful summary of what we're doing in our Buddhist practice. The words Sabba Phasa Akaranang, Kusala Supa Sampada Satchita Pariyotapanang Etang Bhuttana Sasanang. Refraining from evil, cultivating the good, purifying one's mind. This is the teaching that all Buddhas give. That's also an important point. The Buddha pointed out every Buddha will have a meeting in this way to kind of set the ball rolling, to give importance to the Sangha meeting together in harmony. So they say every Buddha, stretching back into the past, there have been many, many Buddhas over many eons, and each Buddha will have an occasion where enlightened disciples come together and he gives this teaching, the Ovada Patimokkha. And it's a very straightforward description of what we have to do. Buddhists are often saying, there's so many teachings from the Buddha, there's so many volumes of the Pali Canon, where do I start? Sometimes we feel overwhelmed by the philosophies and the different practices and all the information available, and especially nowadays with the internet, the proliferation of writings and teachings and explanations on Buddhism, sometimes it seems to overwhelm us, and especially newcomers, they don't know where to start. But this is a very good teaching to start with. Learning to refrain from evil, do good, and purify your mind. That does take or require some further explanation. So usually the practice of refraining from evil is equated with the practice of sila, or morality, particularly on the level of our speech and our actions, our external interaction with the world, refraining from acting or speaking in unwholesome ways, from an unwholesome intention, based in greed, anger, or delusion. That would be the first of these three principles that underlie Buddhist practice. And we're training ourselves to refrain from evil in our speech, our actions. And then the second part, kusala supasampada, cultivating what is wholesome, what is good. Both of them, they're two aspects of our practice that are constantly supporting each other. Not only do we have to give up unwholesome intentions, unskillful intentions, and unskillful speech and actions, but simultaneously we're cultivating the opposite, the good, the skillful, the wholesome. And that's often equated with the development of samadhi. Because what is samadhi? A state of calm based on the continuous presence of wholesome states of mind. That's what samadhi is. When you train your mind to abandon the 5 hindrances, sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness, agitation of mind, and then skeptical doubt. They're all unwholesome states of mind, the 5 hindrances. When you've abandoned them, samadhi arises. And this is like perfecting the cultivation of good, bringing the mind to a point where wholesome dhammas are present. The unwholesome dhammas have faded away from our experience at that time. And we say the mind is ready to contemplate, to understand and develop wisdom and insight. And that's the last of the 3 teachings, purification of mind. How do we purify our mind? Well, contemplating the 4 Noble Truths, contemplating the origin of suffering, which is mental defilements which promote craving and attachment coming from delusion, misunderstanding of the truth, and then abandoning that through developing the path, developing mindfulness, right effort, right samadhi, and developing right vision, clear knowledge and vision of the way things are. One can abandon these mental defilements that cause suffering and purify one's mind. When one attains some samadhi or puts effort into developing samadhi, then one can contemplate in that way. So this is a summary of the whole of the Buddhist path. Sila, samadhi and panya. Morality, states of calm, and then wisdom. So this is possibly why this teaching has become so well known, so popular, because it's so easy. It's like your little handbook for practicing Buddhism on a daily basis. It's not something you only do when you come together on Marga Puja. It's something you can do any day of the week. When you're looking back at your mind through the day as you're going about your business, it's like a framework for reflecting on what's going on. Am I holding on to evil, unwholesome states, or am I abandoning them, refraining from them? Am I cultivating the good, the wholesome, or am I ignoring that? Am I developing insight into the 4 Noble Truths or not? Today in the monastery somebody came and they said one of the most useful things in their practice is to take little moments of time out during their day to re-establish mindfulness and bring their mind back to the present moment so that they feel calm and then can contemplate the Dhamma. Because as we all know, as we go through our day is full of activities. If it's a work day, we have to go to work, we have to travel, then we have to go to work, do many tasks, or even if we're working from home, there'll be many tasks we have to achieve and complete. Or even if it's a rest day, we tend to fill our rest day, our free time up with all kinds of activities. And the tendency is we tend to just be moving from one activity to the next, one task to the next. Our mind is always racing, planning, wanting to get things done, and quite often meeting obstacles in the process of doing that. So sometimes it's useful just to pause in the middle of your day or in the middle of your morning, just like we pause for a coffee break or a time out for a few moments. We can do that for bringing the mind back to the present moment and just asking ourselves, am I caught into wholesome or unwholesome states of mind here? Am I abandoning the unwholesome, cultivating the wholesome, or what? What's going on? You're just asking yourself that question to bring yourself back to the present moment, to re-establish mindfulness. So you have this framework for how to monitor, oversee your state of mind and what's going on. If you're having to interact with other people, whether it's socially or at work, or just as you live your life, are you refraining from unwholesome behavior through body and speech, or are you following unwholesome ways of body and speech? It's a constant reflection, isn't it? Sometimes we find things happen so fast in our life, things come up, moods come up, we react to things. When things are going well, we get excited and happy. When we run into problems and obstacles, we quickly can become frustrated, irritated, or even angry. Things seem to move quite fast, and our mind can change very fast. So like having this little pocketbook available, refraining from evil, cultivating good, purifying the mind. It's like a little teaching you can bring out at any time during your day, just to sit down and ask yourself, what's going on here? Because of course, these truths apply to us all the time. It's a practical reflection on human behavior here. You may be doing a job of work, but if you are getting caught into frustration because of some problem with another person, or just the heavy workload, or some task you have to do but you're finding it difficult to complete it, it's very easy for your mind to fall into unwholesome ways. Usually begins with just an unhappy thought, a negative thought, maybe start complaining, blaming the boss, blaming ourselves, blaming somebody, or feeling sorry for ourselves, despairing with the difficult situation we find ourselves in. Or sometimes it comes out in our speech, complaining to our friend about the workload or the boss or some other person. Or in the more extreme cases, you're displaying your frustration physically, thumping the table, putting things down loudly, banging doors, stomping around because we're unhappy, for example. This will be an example of where we need to start watching ourselves, bring up the reflection. Now, hold on a minute, I'm following the unwholesome, I'm not abandoning the unwholesome here. If you've done it a few times, then you start to get more conviction, more confidence in this process of how we can actually train ourselves as human beings. And this is the purpose of this teaching. The day the Buddha gave this teaching, the Magha Puja, the full moon day, he was teaching this to fully enlightened beings. So for them, they've done the work, they've done this practice. You might say, well, why did he teach it? But we say it's a celebration of the Dhamma. He's just reviewing what has been done for those who are fully enlightened. They've done this, they've been there, they've done it. They've been through the frustrations of life, the mistakes, the disappointments, the ups and downs. They've been through it, and they've learned to free their mind from the unwholesome states of mind that are naturally prompted when things don't go well or we meet with pain and difficulty in our life. They've learned to recognize the unwholesome and refrain from acting on it or speaking on it, and ultimately they've learned to abandon the unwholesome from their mind. So for them it was a review. It's like, oh, this is what you did. We got to this point by doing this and by cultivating the wholesome, by developing the path factors, developing right view, right thought, right effort, right speech, right mindfulness, right samadhi. We've cultivated that and managed to perfect that, and this has given us a platform for purifying the mind, understanding the Four Noble Truths. They've done it, so for them it was like a review of what they've done. But for everyone else it's like guidelines. The Buddha is laying down guidelines that we can take away and use over and over again because they work. And that's the point. If 1,250 enlightened beings are listening to this teaching, what they're doing is sitting there proving that this teaching works. And not even for one generation. The Buddha is saying every Buddha teaches in this way. So it's worked over and over again through the history of the universe, you could say. When we talk about the history of the universe, we usually talk about the Big Bang and expanding star systems and imploding suns and black holes, and like nowadays we send spaceships to Mars to analyze rocks and stuff. That's the normal way of talking about the history of the universe. But you could talk about the history of the universe in terms of enlightened beings, Buddhas arising in the world, showing the world, revealing to the world the Four Noble Truths, the way human beings can free themselves from suffering. You might say that's an even bigger or more important part of history, even though a lot of people ignore it. But it's been going on for eons and eons and eons. Many Buddhas over many eons have done this. And in our current world system, we've had Gautama, the Buddha, gave this teaching to the 1,250 enlightened arahants. They've proven it's worked. So we can get inspiration from that. For myself, hearing or reading or hearing the Ovada Patimokkha is inspiring. And that's the purpose of it. The Buddha is giving this teaching to inspire us, not just for those enlightened bhikkhus who heard it, but for future generations as well. It's an important point. The Buddha said when he gives a teaching, the aim is to give rise to wholesome states of mind. Again, this is the second part of the Ovada Patimokkha. Cultivating the good. So listening to Dhamma regularly reminds us of the teachings, brings up some happiness, some joy. The technical term is piti and pamoja. It's like joy, enthusiasm, confidence, which brightens the mind. When we hear the Dhamma, even though we can't yet fully practice the Dhamma or realize the Dhamma yet, but just hearing it, you might compare it to the day they say, oh, we finally discovered a vaccine for COVID. That day is a good day for the world, isn't it? And we now got vaccines, now they're rolling out the vaccine for everyone. Hopefully this time next year's Magha Puja, everyone who wants to be vaccinated can be vaccinated, and maybe the world can put COVID behind us. That might be a nice dream to have. But in the same way, hearing the Dhamma gives rise to that sense of joy. Oh, there is a way out of suffering for human beings. And it's like this. There's a roadmap. Abandoning the unwholesome, cultivating the good, purifying our mind. If we put effort into this, we can also experience the same peace and happiness that comes from understanding the way things are as those enlightened beings. They've done it. Therefore we can do it. And you may say, well, that was good for them 2,500 years ago. What about now in this day and age with all the problems of the world and all the things facing us? Well, the truths stay the same. The human mind hasn't changed that much. The physical world is always changing, but the nature of the human mind is still subject to the same laws as laws of causality. Suffering arises in the same old way. When we do give in to the more unwholesome states of mind and intentions that arise, greed, anger, selfishness, jealousy, all the different kinds of unwholesome states of mind, when we give in to them, we start to suffer. Just a negative thought, when you hold on to it, you identify with it strongly, you keep it in your mind, you start to feel unhappy. And certainly if you put it into speech, into action, then it will cause you suffering and regret and probably cause someone else some suffering as well. But when we cultivate the intention to refrain from that, to not act on our greed, our anger, to restrain it, then we're setting our mind in a good direction. And then by cultivating the wholesome qualities, the mindfulness, the right effort, the kindness and compassion, the patience, the wisdom, all the skillful qualities that we cultivate, what we call kusala dhamma, wholesome dhammas, then the mind is going in a totally different direction. We start to brighten up, we feel happier. And we build on that through experience. As you practice the Dhamma, hopefully you start to realize, however bad your mind is, however full of stress and suffering it may be from time to time, there is a way out. Other people have experienced the happiness of letting go of the causes of suffering. We can. And even though it's a job that takes time and effort, it can be done. So it's like you can use this little handbook, abandoning evil, cultivating good, purifying your mind. Over and over again, you can come back to it through your day, through your life, as a way of reflecting on the Dhamma. And the Buddha said, when you do this, it should naturally bring up a little bit of joy, the happiness, there is a way out. There's something I can do about this miserable state of mind I'm experiencing, if that's what you are experiencing. There is a way out of it. So hearing the Dhamma, reflecting on the Dhamma every day is a good starting point. It brings some happiness. And that second part of the teaching, developing wholesome states of mind that lead to samadhi, states of stillness, peace in the mind that we are aiming for through meditation. The trigger for that is often the hearing of Dhamma or reflecting on Dhamma. This sense of joy, well-being that arises when we hear the Dhamma leads directly on. It's a cause for the mind to settle down. Gives us a sense of well-being that helps us to develop more continuous mindful awareness, steadiness of mind, so that we can let go of the hindrances to samadhi. The mind lets go of its agitation, worries, anger, desire for different things, all the normal mental activity that disturbs us, bothers us, fills our mind with all kinds of thoughts. We start to let go when we experience some of the joy, hearing the Dhamma and experiencing a sense of, there is a way out of this. The mind brightens, and then when you practice mindfulness, the mind can settle down. Ajahn Chah used to say, when you hear the Dhamma, it's quite possible your mind will quite quickly relax, feel brighter, feel happier, because the Dhamma is powerful like that. So he used to say when he's giving a Dhamma talk, if your mind becomes calm and peaceful, that's fine. You can let go of even the words of the Dhamma teaching that you're hearing. Just let them go and stay with the feeling of peace on the inside, because the mind has become wholesome. You've completed the first two parts of this teaching. You've abandoned the unwholesome and you've cultivated the wholesome. So now you can let go. You can even let go of the words of a Dhamma teaching and just stay with that wholesome mind on the inside. And this happens sometimes, especially in monasteries. Sometimes a teacher gives a talk and someone becomes very radiant and peaceful listening to the talk. They enter a state of samadhi. So the talk is finished and the person is still sitting there. And sometimes even everybody leaves the hall and that person is just sitting there, peaceful. I've seen it before. I've even experienced it before myself. And you stay in your state of wholesome samadhi for a while. You open your eyes and there's no one there. Everyone's gone. They've all gone back to sleep or do whatever they're going to do. And you, the practitioner, experiencing the wholesome state of mind, is like, oh, where did everyone go? It can be even a problem. I remember once, or several times actually, translating for senior monks who are giving a very good, very inspiring Dhamma talk, and I'm having to remember what they say and translate into English from Thai. This happened with Ajahn Kalyano on a couple of occasions. And the mind is so inspired, it becomes so bright, so peaceful, it just goes into a state of samadhi, and then you can't remember a word they've said. And they chatter on for a few minutes, and then you have to say, I'm sorry, I didn't know what you said. And it's not because you've forgotten, but your mind just goes into a state of calm. So the teachers always say, if that happens, the wholesome dhammas arise, enjoy it and keep it going. Ajahn Mahabua used to say, if you're peaceful in your meditation before the meal time, well, don't bother eating that day, just enjoy the peace of mind, because it's such a rare thing to experience. You know, in a human life, maybe some people only experience a bit of samadhi once or twice. If you're practicing regularly, hopefully you'll experience more, but it can be a very rare experience. So savor it. And even if you have some important event, just say, well, I was meditating and I got peaceful. That's all right. This is what we call the food for the mind. You know, every day we're eating food for the body, which is important, but food for the mind we only take in occasionally when this state of happiness arises, when the attention turns inwards and the mind is wholesome. It's abandoned the unwholesome dhammas, the wholesome dhammas have arisen. And that may be only occasionally. So enjoy it, savor it. And the most important benefit that comes from it is it helps you to develop insight into the true nature of this body and mind. Because when the mind's attention is turned inwards, the hindrances pass away, the mind is calm, peaceful, it's had its food, its mental food, the food of the joy and happiness, then it's ready to contemplate. It's ready to contemplate truths that are often hard to contemplate. You know, in our normal state of mind, it's quite difficult to contemplate impermanence or not self. You know, they're just words, aren't they? But when the mind is calm, those words start becoming experiences that you can see, you can know. So like before I gave the talk today, we were doing some contemplation of the body. And most people find contemplating the physical body very difficult. You know, to spend more than a few moments turning your attention to contemplate the hair of your head, or hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, bones, flesh. You know, it sounds like a horror movie. That's probably your first reaction. But when your mind is calm and in a wholesome state, then it's quite practical and possible to turn attention to contemplate the body and see the body as an object rather than my body, which I love or hate or have all kinds of opinions about. When your mind is calm, it's possible to look on the body just as the body. And then you can start to investigate or analyze it. You know, what's it made up of? 4 elements: earth, air, fire, water. What's the nature of this body? Well, it's constantly changing. You know, the cells are being born and dying every moment. Our body is changing, it's aging every day. We're getting a little bit older, and we have all kinds of different experiences with this body. We feel heat and cold, and we feel hungry, and then feel full, and we eat food, we digest food, we have to excrete food out. We feel energetic, and then we feel tired, we sleep. We get ill, sometimes we're healthy, sometimes we're ill. There's so many changes taking place in this body. Normally we just react to them, don't we? If you feel ill, then you feel ill in the mind as well as the body. If you feel hungry, you feel agitated mentally as well as physically. If you look in a mirror, there'll be things you like about the way you look, and then there'll be things you don't like about the way you look, and you'll be seeing blemishes and trying to get rid of them and worrying about them. Normally we're on that more superficial level of just identifying with this body as a self and forming all kinds of views and opinions about it because we see it as a self. But when the mind is calm in samadhi, it's in a wholesome state, you can educate your own mind at that point. It's in the best position to learn about reality. It's like your mind goes into this spacious state where it's calm, it's dropped all its preconceived notions and views and opinions. It's gone quiet for a while, the chatter has gone quiet. Now you can pick up the body and look at it again with fresh eyes. And you can see, yes, this body it's a collection of elements. No longer just obsessed with the beauty or the ugliness of the body, now you're just looking at it as a body made up of elements that are changing. Because they're changing, they can't bring us lasting happiness. Your body is not really an ultimate refuge. It's not a place that you're going to find constant happiness because it's changing. It does bring us aches and pains and illness sometimes. It never feels right. It doesn't look right, doesn't feel right. Ultimately, it's not a self in the sense you can't control it. It's not something you can just command to do what you want and be the way you want. These kind of insights are becoming revealed when your mind is calm and you're looking at the body with the eyes that are wholesome, the inner Dhamma eye that is wholesome and peaceful. The truths about the body are revealed from the inside. And you're also seeing ultimately a human body is only so good. It's not that attractive. There's a lot of unattractive bits. Now your mind maybe is in a position to look and understand that and accept those truths. The impermanence of the body, the unattractiveness of the body. And that actually is very peaceful. That's helping your mind to abandon all kinds of wrong views, mental defilements based on greed, anger and delusion. It changes. Your perception, your view of the body changes when you do this. Little by little, maybe not just once, but little by little, your views change and your mind starts to look at things in the light of Dhamma rather than from a place of wanting, not wanting, attaching, non-attaching, all the sort of normal way of thinking about this body, and our sense of ownership for the body starts to disperse. That may lead to the completion of the final of those three teachings, the purification of the mind. What makes an enlightened person an enlightened person? Well, number one, changing the view of the body and seeing the body as ultimately not self. It's a collection of the four elements. It's here for a while, and then it gets old and sick and dies. It's not to be clung to as a self. And this may, at the moment, sound very idealistic and far away, but how did all those enlightened monks and nuns, men and women over the centuries, get to the point where they're enlightened? Is by practicing this little by little, educating their mind, training their mind, to abandon evil, cultivate good, and develop samadhi and insight into the truth of the way things are. Earlier today, somebody was talking about a teacher I've always had great respect for, who passed away a few years ago. He's Lumpur Sangwan. I sometimes talk about him. I remember him saying once one of the reasons he became a Buddhist monk was because he had this amazing vision with his eyes open. When he was a layman, he was in his home and he saw a woman walking past his house, and she was, in the conventional sense, an attractive woman, But as he looked at her, she turned into a skeleton right before his eyes. The vision of her as a skeleton came up. And his explanation of that was that maybe he's practiced meditation on the body, contemplating the body in a previous life. And so this was a bit of good karma coming up again for him. And he said it brought such a great sense of dispassion and detachment at that moment. It was like the fruit of many of his reflections on his life. Like at that time, he was about at the age of 35. He wasn't a young man. He didn't ordain when he was a young man. He ordained later in life. He'd already had a job, family. And just seeing this beautiful woman as a skeleton just kind of was a culmination of a number of insights. Just seeing ultimately the world is impermanent, not self, not to be attached to. And it was like the moment when he said, now it's time to go off and ordain as a monk. And he said after that he had other insights. He realized all the possessions that he had accumulated. He was, his family was reasonably well off. He had quite a bit of money, land, and was doing quite well. He wasn't in a situation that he was, desperate or in a crisis that he needed to ordain as a monk. His determination to become a monk came from insight, from wisdom, not from despair or suffering. And he said once he decided to become a monk, he had this amazing time where he had been a wealthy man in the farming community, but because he was wealthy, he had lent a lot of money to different people who were less well off than him. He had good sila, so he was honest, hardworking. He'd amassed quite a bit of wealth, but he would lend it to people who were in hardship. But once he decided to be a monk, he thought, all this money that people owe me, I don't really need it anymore. So he went around to see all the people who were in debt to him and just said, it's okay, you don't need to pay me back. And they were all astonished because they were all suffering, thinking, he's coming around to collect his debt and I haven't got any money. So they were all a bit worried when they saw him because they knew they were in debt. But when he said, well, it's okay, you don't need to pay me back, they were so happy. So he said that was one of his dhanas he did before he became a monk. He just let go of all these debts people owed him, made them very happy, and he said it made him even happier, seeing the impermanence of worldly wealth. It really doesn't matter to your peace and happiness internally. And he went off to become a monk. So the kind of insights you get that purify the mind are like this. When your mind becomes calm, cool with the Dhamma, peaceful on the inside, you've cultivated wholesome states of mind, then you can really understand the Dhamma and you can let go. Why can people become monks and nuns? They're really willing to let go of the world. It's one of the reasons we have monks and nuns in the world, is to remind all of you who are not monks and nuns that it can be done, and that the way out of suffering is actually letting go, not accumulation of wealth and seeking fame and fortune. That brings you happiness, but of a very temporary nature. So when you see the monk or the nun walking down the road, they're basically reminding you, actually, you need to do more meditation. You need to abandon these unwholesome states of mind, cultivate the good, purify your mind. That's the way you'll become happier. So whether it's on Magha Puja or any other day of the year, it's valuable to associate with Sangha, see Sangha, talk to Sangha, remind yourself of Sangha, because they're showing you the way out of suffering. It's one of the nice things about being a monk or a nun is you're a heavenly messenger to the lay community. You're an ambassador. Like in the world, ambassadors are always important people because they represent their country. So if you're ambassador for the UK, you're ambassador representing the Queen of England. Or if you're ambassador for Thailand, you're representing the King of Thailand. You have a grand title and everyone treats you with great respect. And that's good, that's the way the world works. But monks and nuns are also treated with respect, and we're ambassadors for the Dhamma. But we don't get to sit in fancy cars, and people don't make a big fuss about us in the way worldly ambassadors get treated, but we're just quietly reminding you of the truths that real happiness comes from the inside, through training your heart to abandon the unwholesome, cultivate the good, purify your mind. So for today, maybe I've said enough, just given you a reminder of this teaching of the Ovada Patimokkha. And after this, I think we'll have a question and answer session.